Welcome to another edition of the Willy Bragg Show, July the 1st, 2023. This is the Saturday night edition of the Willy Bragg Show, where I work with KRTD Media, the Cabros News Group. And here's where we're to explain things to people how this works. And it works like this. That KRTD Media promotes me and I promote them and we promote each other. And that way we bypass the algorithms that, game that the social media likes to play upon independent content makers. And I'm encouraging you to do the same thing. It's the only way we're going to beat this game. The online censorship against independent content makers. This is the way we can actually circumvent these people, these motherfuckers on the top. So there is that. I want to talk about this whole thing about billionaires because there is there's basically almost a political correctness of sorts among the right wing in this country, the conservatives, that there's like a hands-off limits when it comes to the powerful and the wealthy. Usually are people who do not have wealth and power defending them. I have noticed that trend, and it boggles my mind. You hear statements like, well, I never heard anybody getting a job from a poor man's before. This sort of thing, or what you trying to do? You trying to punish success? And it just, some of these things just grates on me. And so, with the Titan sub that basically, where the five people died trying to get to the Titanic, and they used substandard material and they weren't regulated properly. There's a lot of jokes that were made. And am I glad these people died? Of course not, on one hand. But on the other hand, when I hear these jokes, do I mourn and my heart bleeds? How dare somebody goes and make fun of these people that died? Again, I'm not glad that they're dead, but you know what? It's kind of like, it's kind of like, well, if somebody's homeless and they lose everything they got, or they can't afford medical care, whatever, there's this, well, it's their fault attitude. It's sort of like, well, they had it coming, or they weren't careful, they didn't plan carefully, so it's, hey, it's their fault, tough luck on them kind of attitude. But then it's kind of like when you go and make a dig at the wealthy, it's like, excuse me, that's in bad taste. And I have a problem with that. So, and I want to touch on that today. This edition of the Willy Bragg Show may be a little bit shorter than usual because I worked last night, and I'm extremely tired right now. So if I sound like I'm a little zoned out, that would explain it. But suffice to say, we'll begin at the beginning, as I like to say. And yeah, I touched on the double standard that exists, and it's a double standard that has kind of been around it's been around before this modern neoliberalism, this neoliberal era that we live in. But considering that we are in this neoliberal era, I do think it needs to be addressed just the same. And so what I want to do, again, let's start where everything sort of ended and began in this whole thing. Then we're going to start basically back in the days of where the New Deal era, when the Great Depression took place. The stock market crash of 1929. And it's not like the stock market crash in 1929 took place and whoops, hours later we're in a depression. It was something that it happened little by little. The banks were collapsing little by little. The businesses were collapsing little by little. People were losing their homes little by little. The poverty started increasing little by little. And before you know it, you knew you were in a Great Depression. And so that's kind of how this whole thing started. And by the time 1932 came along, Franklin Roosevelt became president. Now, he didn't come in there with this robust plan to rescue the economy. He came in there campaigning as a standard Democrat. And strangely enough, Herbert Hoover was probably going to do some things that would have been reminiscent of what FDR would have done, had Hoover been reelected. So it could have been possible that reelection of Hoover, he could have actually done something similar to a New Deal. And who knows what the realignment would have been like in this country, electorally speaking, if that would have happened. Having that said, FDR was elected, and FDR attempted to, once it was on his lap, he realized he had to do something. And it was not that he was an ideologue or anything like that, but he was pragmatic enough that, he was pragmatic enough to like, we have to have people working. We have to get the American economy back on track. So he did what he could. And, the Social Security, the jobs programs, the regulation of banking, that took place, things of that nature. And there's been a lot of revisionism. A lot of people like, well, just Franklin Roosevelt, his New Deal just absolutely just prolonged the Depression. Yeah, I don't see how that could be. Basically giving people a job. Oh, that's harming them. Right. Yeah. Sure. Things like the Tennessee Valley Authority, they were having a flooding problem in that part of the world. Well, guess what happened? No businesses would go over there and do anything about it because it wasn't profitable for businesses to go in there. So you have farms and the local communities that were being damaged due to flooding problems. As soon as the federal government came in and created the Tennessee Valley Authority, they were like, oh no, creeping socialism. How dare the government do this? But they weren't dared. The private sector didn't give a damn about this. And so this is an example where the government had to come in to do something about it. And you know what? FDR's New Deal reform. I don't care how many conservative right-wing revisionists want to claim otherwise. The only thing they may be correct on was that the manufacturing sector, due to hyper-production from World War II, got us out of the Great Depression, but it made a hell of a lot easier with infrastructure being improved in this country. FDR got us out of the Great Depression with his reforms. The only problem with FDR's New Deal was that it did not go far enough. There were things that were, the second Bill of Rights, for example, that he was proposing in 1944, that he wanted to see, didn't really go through. And, that sort of thing. Harry Truman, with a lot of his faults, with dropping the two bombs in Nagasaki and Hiroshima, certainly something to hold against him. But domestically at home, you saw what happened. There was the beginning of things like civil rights. I mean, the military, whatever we may think about the military, was desegregated. And actually, Darren Briscoe refers back to 1943. The Washington, D.C. was actually desegregated by executive order by FDR because A. Philip Randolph was actually about ready to stage a march on Washington in 1943. 20 years prior to the 1963 March on Washington. And Roosevelt was nervous about that, so he compromised that. He called off the march. I will, by executive order, desegregate the city of D.C. D.C. was desegregated in 1943 as a result. So that was kind of what seemed like a kind of a half-ass measure, was a spark that would actually create some greater sparks, desegregating the military. Brown versus Board of Education in the 1950s. When Dwight Eisenhower was president, he did not dump the New Deal. There was the interstate highway system, infrastructure were emphasized, things of that nature. As I said. There was, both parties were actually kind of okay with FDR's New Deal. I mean, Eisenhower was much further left by today's standards than Bill Clinton, Barack Obama, and Joe Biden at their most progressive in mindset. So, FDR gave us the New Deal under Harry Truman's Fair Deal. He actually tried to give us Medicare for all. He actually tried to give us a single payer system. The Republicans in Congress destroyed the health care plan that Harry Truman worked on. When Taft-Hartley became law in 1947, he tried to put a stop to it. But you had a liberal wing to the Republican Party then. And the liberal wing of the Republican Party was as receptive to FDR's New Deal as the most of the Democrats were at the time. So there was a New Deal consensus of sorts that took place in the 1940s and 50s. You started to see somebody thinking it went a little bit too far by the time Barry Goldwater came along. And he was the beginning of what was called the New Right, even though he lost badly in 1964. But that victory be culminated in 1980 with Ronald Reagan, with what we see today. And I insist that we do live in the Reagan era. So, and I say this unfortunately. So that's where we're at here in the United States, in that regard. Now, in regard to, this is not just reserved for the United States, because you can simultaneously, one can argue that this was going on elsewhere too. So, like, for example, after 1945, after World War II, Great Britain elected their Labour government that basically made the FDR's New Deal look like, basically makes the FDR New Deal liberalism look like Ronald Reagan's at its most conservative. It was Britain was kind of on the road to socialism in a way. And what I mean by that is the election of Clement Attlee as the prime minister. Well, the Labour government that was elected and Clement Attlee became prime minister, which is really weird because Margaret Thatcher is known as the lady who's the prime minister who assaulted socialism in the UK, but nobody really know who were the government that brought us to socialism. And the government that brought us to socialism was Clement Attlee, his Labour government, which lasted from 1945 to 1951. that created full employment, improve wages and labor rights, rebuild the national infrastructure after World War II, build affordable social housing, and they ran budget surpluses. If you want to call it a capitalism of sorts, they introduced the golden age of capitalism. And they established the NHS, massively reduced social inequality. And let me back it up with the word capitalism, their golden age of capitalism. I mean, it certainly wasn't, Soviet style communism, of course. It was a mixed economy, what they call social democracy, what they had in the UK. But the point being that the programs that help the poor and the having healthcare available free for the entire population, having pensioners, having a guaranteed retirement, things of that nature was good for the British people. Having powerful labor unions, and even with the mixed economy that the state-owned companies that were nationalized after World War II, the coal industry, railroads, electric companies, you name it. When those companies were purchased, they became what were called public corporations. And I know this because this British parliamentary road to socialism is music to my ears. It was a beautiful time when they were the world's most capitalist country their socialism was probably one of the most profound in the Western world. I mean, they actually made serious attempts to nationalize whole industries. So while it was still a capitalist economy, there was a lot of nationalized industries in there in ways that the other countries that went in a similar route didn't quite do. I mean, they were able to do the healthcare for all and the welfare state and strong unions, but they did not take a road to social ownership in the way that that it was done in Britain, where they actually had the unions, they had the former owners, and the government working together to try to improve what was damaged infrastructure after World War II. And here's the thing. Winston Churchill returned to 10 Downing Street in 1951. And he really didn't do too much. I mean, he privatized steel and iron, things like that, a couple of industries. And that was the thing. Between 1945 and 1979, when Thatcher came into power, you had Tory governments and Labour governments. And when even when the Tories were in power, what did they do? They may have privatized one or two industries, and then Labor would come back and renationalize the industries that were the one or two industries that were privatized. I mean, they didn't really do too much to tamper with what happened in the British economy. There was not too much that was to be upset. In fact, Harold Macmillan in the 1950s, Tory Prime Minister, gave a left-handed compliment to Labour and their socialist reforms by saying to the British people, "You never had it so good." Contrast Clement Attlee with Margaret Thatcher, who created massive unemployment during her 11 years in power. From 1979 to 1990 as prime minister, she created massive unemployment, eroded wages and labor rights, neglected the national infrastructure, sold off affordable social housing, ran budget deficits, introduced neoliberal pseudo-economics, a lot of privatizations, in other words, and deliberately underfunded the welfare state and massively increased social inequality. And look at the difference between the two. Clement Attlee, when he died in 1967, no publicly funded state funeral. When Margaret Thatcher died in 2013, there was a publicly funded state funeral. That's the serious contrast right there. And so this is, that's where we're living with right there. It brings me to this point. I had to go and mention historically Reagan and Roosevelt, and I had to mention Thatcher and Attlee. For these reasons, I had to mention them because they were incredibly relevant to this discussion about why it's necessary to despise billionaires. So now we are living, well, I consider in this modern age, the Reagan Thatcher, the world Reagan Thatcher. We still live in this world, folks. This is the world we live in. I mean, in Britain, they live under this. In America, this is what we live under. This is the economic vision that we live under, and this is why we can't have nice things. And I would like to see the Reagan Thatcher model come to an end. So, which brings me to my next point here, and it is this. And it brings me down to here in America. And while we live under the Reagan Thatcher vision in America, I say we definitely live under what is called a Reagan Clinton consensus of sorts. Because when Bill Clinton got elected, he didn't end 12 years of Ronald Reagan and George Herbert Walker Bush's presidency. And I thought that was going to come to kind of a screeching halt when he was elected. I celebrated in 1992 when Bill Clinton won. And I remember this. And he was not my first choice in the Democratic primaries, obviously. I was never really keen on Bill Clinton. But the thing about Bill Clinton was he turned out to be a disappointment almost right away, to the point where I totally despise Bill and Hillary Clinton. And any Democrat that's affiliated with the Clinton wing of the Democratic Party, which I am totally independent of the two-party system today, but I have special animosity toward any individual associated with the Bill and Hillary Clinton wing of the Democratic Party. And contrary to what a lot of right-wingers want to think about the Democratic Party is not on the left. I just want to make that clear. Yeah. I mean, they're not as far right as the Republicans. Sure. Are they to the left of the Republicans? Yes. Are they left wing? Not really. Chris Hedges himself said that if you compare the Democratic Party here in the United States to basically any political party in Western Europe, they'd be almost to the right of any Western European conservative or Christian Democratic Party or any center-right entity in Europe. Whether we're talking about Tories in the UK, the Christian Democratic Union in Germany, the Union for a Popular Majority in France, or any other conservative party around, the Popular Party in Spain, the Moderate Party in Sweden, or any other political party that exists in Europe that's on the center-right spectrum. The Democrats, while they do fit on the left side of our Overton window, because we have a far-right Overton window here, on the Overton window sector, the Democrats here in the United States would be on the right in most European countries. And there's nothing that anybody could tell me that would convince me otherwise. And just look at the policies. Just look at the nothing that was done in the last 2 years. That speaks volumes for itself, right there. So right next to that brings me to I guess you could say the next point. The same thing could be said in the UK. I mean, in the UK, you have what I call a Blair Thatcher consensus. New Labour became a thing in the UK. This abomination in 1994 when John Smith died and Tony Blair became the leader of the Labour Party. And while the Labour Party was kind of going downhill prior to Tony Blair eliminated what was called Clause 4 from the Constitution of the Labour Party, which called for nationalization of the major means of production. I forgot how it was worded, but it was convoluted, probably archaic language from 1918 that was put in their Constitution, and then it was replaced with some word salad about how the Labour Party is a democratic socialist party working to build a community, blah, 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 in his usual Tony Blair style fashion. That might be the least bad thing that happened with New Labour, but once Tony Blair came in, the privatization continued, the neoliberalism continued, and private finance initiatives were crept into some of the public services, where it was a lot of public sector, private sector partnership and everything. It just looked like a lot of the bland BS that the Democrats are known for here in the United States. It's like, what did he do? Did he go and study the Democratic Leadership Council and said, this is what we wanted to do? Because that's exactly what it sounded like. It sounded like the Democratic Leadership Council just did not take over the Democratic Party. It went into the UK and took over the Labour Party too. So the DLC, as I said many, many times, the organization that Reaganized the Democratic Party in the United States in the 1990s, the Blair people Thatcherized the Labour Party in the 1990s with their what was called the New Labour Project. And I totally despise Tony Blair, obviously. So, and were there attempts to put a stop to this? Of course, there was on both sides of the Atlantic. There was a serious attempt to put a stop to this. It was, in 2016 and 2020, Bernie Sanders tried, in 2014 or 2015, I think it was when Jeremy Corbyn took over the Labour Party. He tried. They both tried, and both got basically thrown under the bus. Independent Bernie Sanders got thrown under the bus in the Democratic Party, and Jeremy Corbyn was kicked out of the Labour Party. When Jeremy Corbyn runs again for re-election in his Islington North constituency, he's going to be running as an independent because Keir Starmer, the current leader of the Labour Party, is a jerk, and he's just an awful individual. And he's just a terrible person. I don't have the graphics with me, but y'all know what Boris Johnson looks like. He was Britain's Donald Trump. Rishi Sunak, who succeeded him, is basically Britain's Barack Obama. All in the Tory party, So there's that. So, but here in America, it comes down to this too, that no matter who's in charge in this country, no matter what the makeup of Congress is, no matter who resides in the White House, and no matter whether he's majority leader or minority leader in the U.S. Senate, Mitch McConnell, Mitch McConnell. Oh, Mitch McConnell. I'm an asshole. That guy. He calls all the shots. We can't have nice things because of this man. This man is the reason we can't have nice things. And he's one of the worst people you can imagine. I mean, I despise this man like there's no tomorrow. I mean, if there's a bad idea or there's in Congress floating around, you can bet your beetle boots Mitch McConnell is in favor of this. And he's not a well-loved man at all. I mean, I don't know. Only one person I've ever heard speak highly of Mitch McConnell, and that was Rush Limbaugh, which it tells you everything you need to know about Mitch McConnell. So, and so we can't have nice things as a result. But let's go back to Reagan, because this is where the glorification of wealth started. I mean, the mindset of people who should know better voting against their interests. Ronald Reagan, when Ronald Reagan came along in the 1970s, I mean, he was considered an extreme long shot. I mean, he was considered somebody to not be taken seriously. And the coalition that was built up, as you can see here, this coalition that was built up, it's accurate, but it's not totally accurate. And I will explain what I mean. And I'm going to give you what I think is accurate about the coalition that was built under Reagan. Southern conservatives were part of his coalition. And that's accurate. They were mostly Jim Crow Democrats, to tell you the truth. The religious conservatives, evangelical Christians, mostly, what is known as the religious right today, the Christian right. That was a big part of his coalition. The traditional Republicans, people who are just Republicans in general, that's how I'm interpreting that. I'm a little nervous about this meme that uses the term Western libertarians, because libertarians don't really fall under, in my view, don't fall under left or right per se. I mean, I guess on economics, they do fall under right. Socially, they tend to fall under a more progressive view of the world. So they don't really, to me, they don't really fall under a left-right paradigm. But some people will say they do fall under the right part of the paradigm. If they do, I guess they're the part of the right paradigm that I can tolerate, because I mean, I on some social questions they're correct. Drug legalization, LGBTQ rights, free speech, anti-war, anti-death penalty, that sort of thing. National security state, they oppose to a lot of that aspect of that, where they separate from the conservatives in that regard, although they may agree with the conservatives on the economics. So they're a mixed bag. I mean, I reject their economics, but socially they're not wrong. So I don't really like to add them to that coalition, but that's just for me. And then you got the Reagan Democrats. These are the blue-collar social conservatives that have traditionally voted Democrats in the past. Probably, I would say, in the Northeast and the Midwest, and all of that. And that part of the coalition was kind of shaky too, because some of them stopped voting for the Republicans for the longest time. Some of them went to Ross Perot in 1992. They went to the Democrats mostly for many years. They voted for John Kerry. They voted for Barack Obama twice, that sort of thing. A lot of them voted for Joe Biden back again in 2020, but in 2016, for the same reason, many of them went to Ross Perot. A lot of them went to Donald Trump, because Donald Trump was talking their language in terms of bringing jobs home, that sort of thing. And Michael Moore have said it, that these people are not to be demonized. Those folks, the ones who will worry about their jobs, and that's why they voted for Trump. Bernie Sanders says the same thing. Cornel West is kind of saying the same thing himself. So but when I think of the coalition, when I think of the coalition, I think of basically. I basically think of the religious right. I think of neoconservatives, the people who love the Bush Cheney foreign policies, the 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 Jim Crow Democrats that became Republicans, the business interests. Again, that's kind of skewed in this day and age, but it was a little more clear cut during the Reagan years. You had a lot of yuppie billionaires today too. So, because the Democratic Party went so far to the right on economics, some of them do vote for the Democrats, whereas they used to vote Republican, in my view. And then you have again the Reagan Democrats. So they went back to the Democrats. Some of them did go for Trump for 5 minutes, and some of them, in its time, they did go with Ross Perot. But they were definitely on board with Barack Obama twice, and they could have possibly voted for Bernie Sanders had Bernie Sanders not been, shall I say, deprived in the creative way that Democrats deprived Bernie Sanders twice. I'm choosing my words carefully because I don't trust YouTube. So anyway, that's kind of what I want to touch on. But I also want to touch on what I call negative rights versus positive rights, because they will try to justify this love for wealth with what I call negative rights versus positive rights. And what I mean by that is that negative rights are, in my view, when I hear them talk about it, is if there's an injustice that exists in its present order, it's always been the way it is. And anything you do to alter it is going to take away the rights of those people. So in other words, you need to keep the negative rights so their rights are not violated. In other words, keep the suffering going on the other side. I have a problem with that. Because, the suffering continues. And when their suffering continues, talking about the poor, the middle class, and what is referred, Nina Turner said, the barely middle class. And a lot of people never talks about the barely middle class, but and they're probably the most vulnerable of all groups. I don't really care what happens to those of wealth when it comes to negative rights, their rights being taken away. I really don't care. I mean, to me, it's just an excuse to keep the injustice going on to protect those with power. And it comes in other forms too. Like when I hear people talk about their extreme views of what they consider property rights, or we don't talk about how they will want things to be the way it was, like in the beginning of this country when U.S. Senate were appointed by the state legislature instead of being done by the people themselves. Where some people even talk about, I heard people in the last decade talk about only having property owners have the right to vote, which will only guarantee this as an outcome. Property right owners will prevent other people from becoming property owners. That's the way I see it. And then there's this talk about republic versus democracy. And this is something that really gets on my nerves when they'll be like, we're a constitutional republic. We're not a democracy. When I hear that, I mean, it's in a weird disguised way. They're trying to keep their authoritarianism under the cloak of a disguised liberty that they claim that they're for. And so they'll try to do a gotcha with these semantics. So, I use the term, I know what a constitutional republic is. And in a lot of ways, we are a constitutional republic. And in a lot of ways, we are a democracy. We're not a pure republic. We're not a pure democracy. I wouldn't want us to be a pure republic. I wouldn't want us to be a pure democracy. I believe, constitutional republic is fine with democratic mechanisms. A democracy is fine with some Republican mechanisms. You have your checks and balances there, and that's how it functions. If it's extremely one way or the other, you will get authoritarianism. It's true, you would get authoritarianism, but the right, and I hate to put it in the terms of left versus right, because it sounds like I'm playing the blue game and red game politics, and I so despise the red state, blue state, red team, blue team political games. I'm so over that. I'm so over that. Yes, there is left and right, but when we're talking about red team versus blue team, we're not talking about left and right. We're talking about two factions of the right at each other's throats. When it comes to the war, when it comes to wars abroad, they're on the same page. And during the Bush years, they were bombing Muslims in the Middle East and drone striking Muslims with Christian bombs, evangelical Christian bombs. Now, during the Biden years, they're bombing Muslim people with rainbow bombs. The difference is only subcultural war issues. Those bombs are still killing people, no matter who they are. No matter if it's Sean Hannity cheering it during the Bush-Cheney years or Rachel Maddow cheering it today. It is still there. People are still dying because of the foreign policy of this country. That's the wars are being waged and all. So, but they'll go and try to make a culture war out of everything, and we're talking about on both sides. And so when it comes to this sort of thing, both sides will go and use these issues, these little side issues, to get us sniping at each other, and they'll try to sidetrack us, and woke versus non-woke, they'll try to tell us how trans people are supposedly grooming, when all they want to do is live their lives. And evangelicals, not every one of them, but you have a political movement of evangelicals as opposed to somebody who is an evangelical Christian who are minding their own business. When I use the term evangelical, I'm using it as a political term. You got some of those that wants to have a victim complex, that, if you disagree with them, you're persecuting them because you disagree with them. Just because you don't want to submit to their Christian Sharia way of life, they're like, we Christians are under attack. That's the kind of mentality. And maybe I'm speaking from a mindset of somebody who lived in the South all his life, what I've seen around me, and which obviously have shaped my political worldview. But a lot of these folks, what do? They end up protecting the wealthy. They do. Every damn time. Now, weirdly, and maybe it has a lot to do with Citizens United. And I think maybe the right, some people on the right may start, if they think about it, they should start regretting their decision on supporting Citizens United, because now corporations are people because of that decision. Corporations going supposedly woke. I laugh when I hear that because, again, It's great that a workplace will have a rainbow flag instead of firing somebody for being LGBTQ. But some people get mad. Oh, they got a rainbow flag in there. How? That's so terrible. It's a rainbow flag, you know. Um, I would like to see workplaces be more receptive to unions, because if you have unions in the workplaces and everything like that, you will have a lot of discrimination policies that they'll have to uphold. So there will be no reason to have to worry about discrimination, because a lot of places that are unionized are pretty good about that, as the clause in their contracts. As weak as unions are in this country, they've been pretty good about that aspect. But union jobs, living wage. This is something that I would like to see more focus on. But when I hear people like Josh Hawley and Steve Bannon and people like what's her name, Marjorie Taylor Greene, talk about corporations, they're not talking about it in terms of living wage being denied to workers. They're talking about some woke whatever, some what they consider cultural Marxism of sorts, which there's really no such a thing as cultural Marxism in America. And you have to be aware when you hear the right wing talk about cultural Marxism. Cultural Marxism today, what would it, I mean, in Germany, the term was cultural Bolshevism. And during the time Hitler was coming along, and it was directed at a certain group of people that were on the top of his shit list, that were killed in the camps, shall we say. So you have to be careful with words like cultural Marxism. Yeah, or when Soros, to a lot of these folks, that's the new Rothschilds. So you have to be aware. Now, George Soros. Are there things to dislike about George Soros? Of course. I mean, he's a shit lib. He's not a lefty. He's a shit lib. I was grateful 20 years ago that he caused a lot of trouble to the right with funding of certain things like Air America when it was kind of necessary. But he's no good today. I mean, 20 years ago when Bush and Cheney were the enemy, he was a reliable ally. But now the shit libs are kind of in charge. They're sort of doing the same havoc that was done under Bush and Cheney. So for that reason, I wouldn't consider George Soros any sort of lefty ally of any substance. So anyway, I just wanted to have that stated and everything. As I said today, I do apologize, but I am incredibly exhausted. So this is normally a 2-hour program, but I decided that tonight is just going to be roughly an hour. So, but I will talk to everybody here quick on the chat line. But I also want to make an announcement too. A couple of announcements. One is Saturday night. So, at midnight, drop by Extra Boya, drop by and to watch the Secret Show, and drop by to say hi to Uncle Warren and to say hi to Miss Jimi Sunderland, and because they co-host together every Sunday morning / Saturday night. Great times. So be sure to drop on by to watch the Secret Show. Also, speaking of Jimi Sunderland, a couple of things. One, I promised to do this for her. her information is on the description box below. Be sure to follow her on YouTube and Twitch. She's trying to get up to 100, and she's trying to get up to 100 right now. So if you could please go ahead and subscribe to her YouTube channel and follow her on Twitch. And also in the fall, probably sometime late in next month in August or early September, we're working the details. Jimmy and I will be having a new program here on YouTube called Braglands. It's going to be our show. It's going to be on once a week. Looks like right now it's going to be on every Friday evening between 5 and 7. And we will let you all know about that project and how in more detail later on and all of that. So there is that. Let me talk to everybody here on the chat line. And then I'm going to have to sign off to take a quick nap so I can be sure to watch The Secret Show, because I worked my butt off last night. I'm tired as hell. So anyway, Miguel was here. Hey, Miguel, how are you doing today? Warren, hey, how are you? And over here from Twitch was Diggs BTW7. Diggs BTW7. Hey, what's up, G? Hey, what's up? Reagan was one of the worst, says Gamer for Life. Hey, Gamer, how are you? And yes, he was. Reagan was the pits. Let's see. Hey, Willie. Hey. And everybody's saying hey to each other. All right. Reagan wrapped up the war on drugs, too. Yes, that's something to hold against him. Uncle Warren, I'm glad you're doing a show tonight. I am too, because that was a rough time not having to watch The Secret Show for a while. Thanks, Gamer. Yeah, Reagan was the OG Biden. JB from the JB Font Show, James referred to Donald Trump as the orange Joe Biden. I was cracking up. I was like, you know what? I like that. He said that on a earlier post today. Let's see here. All right. I wasn't born yet in that era, but I'm sure he was. I'm sure he was Uncle Warren. Oh, you weren't born during the Reagan era? Yeah. Well, I was born in the 60s. I was a toddler in the 70s and a teenager in the 80s. Let's see. Dwight D had the idea of the interstate highway system. Yeah, he was more of a socialist than the Democrats that the Republicans like to call socialists. If Dwight D was alive today, the Dems would hate him. Yeah, he'd be far left to some people. That's right. He resents billionaires, top billionaires, because they were clearly the nice Malta and cahoots. Choose the heretics, chooses Carnation Revolutions. Now, how are you doing today? Also, their diplomats' international immunity comes with certain supposed expectations, and here they are red-handed, stealing from us and using everything they got to wage war on us. Okay, all right. Let's see. Resentment might be an understatement. Well, I when it comes to class war, I say class war now, class war yesterday, class war today, class war tomorrow, class war perpetually. When diplomatic international immunity, when diplomatic international community is no more criminally licensed villainry. True selling is dead, and the Okra army's going to get you. Okay, let's see. Fuck the Necrophiliac Yacht Club. Yep. Yep. Look how gay month's finally over. Oh yeah. Let's see. Tony Blair makes Boris Johnson looks good. Let's see. Wait a minute. My dyslexia is kicking in the head. Tonight. Boris Johnson makes Tony Blair looks good. That's what I meant to say. Boris Johnson actually was not as bad as I thought he was going to be. I would never vote for him. I'll make no mistake, but he praised the NHS when he had COVID. And I will love showing that to conservatives. When the conservatives say that the British healthcare system is terrible, the terrible thing that the Britons had to NHS, I said, really? I said, well, look at this conservative. His name is Boris Johnson, and he just praised the NHS. Let's see. Also, I'm not doing bong hits on doing the vaporizer. Let's see. You know what? I should go up to Virginia. There's no reason for me not to drive up to Virginia where that stuff is legal. I've been wanting some cannabis lasagna. Damn it, I'm going to have some cannabis lasagna at some point. Sorry to be all high up in your chat, Willie. That's okay. Juicy Juice says Carnation Revolution now, Willie. But I got to do it. It's the therapy for the smoke. Okay, all right. Let's see here. That's right. Congress is going to be roughly 1,400% Jesuit alumni at any given time. I don't know about that. I don't know one way or the other. The Supreme Court is the scrotus of the belly of the beast system. I tell you what they need to do with the Supreme Court. They need to have term limits. I wish they would have term limits on the Supreme Court right now. That's they that's the only way you're going to not make it so to basically defeat the right in the courts. Actually, you could say that the Supreme Court legalized corruption, but then again, as a smoke screen for the fact that the Knights of Malta is immune to the whole time for 1,000 years. Well, okay, well, let's see. Let's see. Let me do this. You good, Willie? I'm good, Anthony. How are you today? I love Willie's impressions. Yeah, sometimes I just get it in me to do those impressions, Warren. Let's see. Hey, Anthony, Choose Heretics found a Carnation Revolutions now. Hello to everybody. Sexy right here. Okay. Let's see what we got. New comments. Let's see here. All right. I'm looking through here. All right. Okay. Let's see. All right. Oh, thank you, Warren. Appreciate that. Appreciate the great words. And yeah, and see you all in a little bit. Yeah, thank you. And as I said, I am going to cut this short tonight because I'm extremely exhausted. So it just happens. And work they wanted me to come into work tonight. I told them I just can't. I have a podcast to do, and I have the secret show to watch tonight. So. And I have to get a little bit of rest right now because I've been sleeping all day and I need to sleep a little more. So, but anyway, shall I say this? Warren, it was great hanging out with you and Jimmy last week. I would love to do that again sometime in the near future. So anyway, if you all like what you heard, please press like and comment. Comment anyway. Should disagree with what I have to say, we'll have a conversation. Feel free to share the comment on this channel. As the First Amendment absolute, this is my duty to inform you to create your own platform and utilize it because we are, in fact, the muckrakers of our time. Be sure to subscribe to my channel here on YouTube and hit the notification bell. Follow me on Twitch, Facebook, and Twitter, and Rumble, which I'm going to use at some point. And be sure to do the same thing for KRTD Media, Converse News Group. Follow them on YouTube, on Twitch, on follow them on on Facebook and Twitter and everything. And remember to always reject corporate media because they have absolutely nothing at all to offer us. And now, until next time, I will see you all next week. Y'all take care. Bye-bye.